It's widely regarded as one of the best routines because of the combination of frequency and volume. It's one of my personal favorites.
Push-pull legs is a great fallback for us. 2 leg days, 2 push days, 2 pull days. That is so much volume for the amount of time that you're spending in the gym.
Welcome to the Lucid Fitness Podcast. I'm Erik and this is Sarah, and we started Lucid Fitness to help beginners find actionable guidance in a sea of fitness and nutrition information.
Welcome back to the Lucid Fitness Podcast. I'm Erik and this is Sarah, and on these episodes we're calling them Build Your Own Workouts. We talk about the different types of workouts that you can use based on how frequently you're going to the gym, and we walk you through the requirements to set up a good first workout for any given routine. This week, we're going to talk about routines that hit both the 3 and 6 day a week mark. And the most classic versions, and the one we recommend at Lucid Fitness, is push-pull legs or push-pull legs, push-pull legs, or push-pull legs X2 if you're going twice a week. This routine is generally it's one of my personal favorites. Doing different types of push-pull legs is generally, I feel like I get the best results, especially if you can go 6 times a week. You get the benefits of both high frequency and higher volume because honestly, you can just spend more time in the gym. But getting ahead of myself, first, let's talk about how we perceive the push-pull leg workouts. What do you know about push-pull? Have you done push-pull legs before?
Yeah, we've done push-pull legs before. Push-pull legs is a great fallback for us as opposed to our normal 5-day split. So we've done that before. I personally do not like push-pull legs as much as a 5-day split. If it was a push-pull legs that maybe had 2 leg days, it would be better. I just for myself find it difficult and end up having struggles when it comes to push-pull legs, especially on push days and pull days, because my muscles are giving out by the time I've worked. It's almost like the same premise of a full body workout. My arms are giving out before I have finished that full push day.
Right.
And so in that, I find them kind of frustrating to work with, but I do like the larger volume when you're able to do them, especially back to back, where you're having 2 leg days, 2 push days, 2 pull days. That is so much volume for the amount of time that you're spending in the gym that you really can't argue with the results.
Yeah, and I think this would be a good opportunity that maybe I talk about the pros of it and you talk about the cons of it.
Yeah.
Seems like a pretty, reasonable thing to do considering I like them and you don't. So I think it's widely regarded as one of the best routines because of the combination of frequency and volume. And what I mean by that is frequency being you're actually able to do back twice a week, legs twice a week, shoulders twice a week, chest twice a week when you can go 6 times a week, right? That's one of the main benefits. Obviously, on just the 3 times a week, though, you don't have the same frequency benefit, but you have good volume and you have volume on both. But the volume is higher because you're splitting things in a more synergistic way and allows you to get, I guess for lack of a better term, like pseudo volume on things that you aren't directly hitting. For example, what I mean by that is like an incline bench press is both hitting your shoulders and your chest, right? And by putting those together, I mean, as you said, that can be a con because it makes it more difficult to do one or the other. But in my eyes, it's a benefit because you're functionally getting more volume by doing it that way. So when you do shoulders and chest together, each of the shoulders exercises is hitting the chest to some extent, right? Like not everything's, a perfect rollover, but And then when you're hitting your chest, you're also getting a certain element of your shoulders being hit. And so those being worked out together, it's a synergistic nature. It's why they go together in what's called push.
Yeah,
They
you
go,
get that sweet like 70-30 where you're getting a good 70-75% of that main movement. Say you're doing a bench press, so you are hitting your chest, but then you're getting that little sweet 30-25-30 on top where you are working those front delts while you're doing that exercise.
yeah. And maybe it's important for us to back up a little and explain what push-pull legs means.
Yeah, let's
So
probably start there.
yeah, so push is all movements that are, pushing away from your body functionally. So shoulders, chest, and triceps, right? Those are push. And then pull is just back and biceps. So anything that feels, like you're pulling, right? And then legs would obviously be legs. And so to clarify that before moving forward, but going back to my point, the pro of the push and the combination is that it becomes much more efficient at working like those synergistic muscles together. And the reason triceps are with those is because you use your triceps in all, heavy push movements for the most part. Anything that's a complex movement for your shoulders and your chest is going to use your triceps to some extent. And so there's that element of you're getting again that pseudo volume on your triceps before you even get to your triceps. And then when you finally get to your triceps, in our experience, usually your triceps are already exhausted, and then you need fewer sets to truly exhaust those muscles.
Mhm.
And that's the beauty of it in my eyes, is even on the 3 day a week, which you said earlier is a good fallback. If you're on 5 and you need some extra time in the week, you can drop to a push pull legs and lose basically nothing, right? Like
Exactly, yeah.
maybe you spend a little bit more time in the gym on your push day, you still get high volume in a much more condensed package. And PPL is a very powerful workout if you can make it 3 days a week, whether it be, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or whatever it may be, you're getting more than enough volume for
Yeah.
each muscle group. And then when you go to the second set of them, the PPL, then you're reaching the point where you're getting more volume than
You
every
would
other
get in
workout.
any other version of
Yeah,
any
you're getting
workout. Yeah.
more volume. You're getting more frequency than everything except a 3 day a week full body. So like it's hard to beat
Yeah.
really. And so that's why I think it's kind of become very familiar to a lot of people. Like I think people still gravitate a bit more towards the conventional because I feel like the 5 day a week fits into the work week like more
Mm.
more normally. Like if you go Monday through Friday, then a more conventional fit. But with push pull legs, you can do interesting things like push pull legs, push pull. Like if you have naturally big legs, cut off the legs. Or like you were saying, like maybe you do one less push
Yeah.
as a female and you do, push pull legs in a 5 day a week. It opens up a lot of flexibility that it still allows for high volume and
Yeah.
high frequency. And that's the beauty of it. And I think that push pull legs, it feels to me like one of the more flexible ones if you're still in that experimental phase because you kind of learn how things like work together, right?
Mhm.
And you learn how all of your chest movements impact your shoulders and your shoulders impact your triceps. Whereas if you keep these all separate on their separate days, like a conventional split, you don't feel as much of the different muscle groups working together, which if you watch our build your first workout on our full body, we do talk about how one of the benefits of the full body is how all of the different muscle groups work together.
Mhm.
I think in push pull legs, you get an aspect of that because you get to see like how all your push movements work together and synergize and affect one another. While I don't necessarily think it's always the best for a beginner, I do think that it allows for a lot of flexibility with programming your routine. And if you're interested in building like a highly effective routine or something that's hyper optimized, I think push pull legs is the play. Because if you can go 6 times a week, it's going to be hard to design a routine that beats it in terms of overall value, right?
Yeah, I would totally agree. Like if someone came to me and said, "What can I do?" Like I can be in the gym every day. What can I do to get the most amount of bang for my buck? And I would say definitely a push pull legs,
Yeah.
and then have that rest day, because you can't beat the amount of volume you're going to get.
Mhm.
So if you're looking to expedite your results, you're looking to really pack on muscle, maybe you're not in that beginner phase, but you're in a experimental phase, which again, push pull legs does work well with, because you're thinking about things in a push movements, pull movements mentality rather than shoulder movements, bicep movements, which tend to make you think more isolatory in your exercises.
Sure.
When you're thinking about push movements and pull movements, you begin to kind of view things in more of like a pull up and push up and all the things, incline, decline things, and how they're all working together, which allows you to kind of experiment into more broad workouts and more broad specific exercises that you maybe wouldn't originally do.
Yeah, it's a different perspective, but it it does come at a cost, right? And
Yeah.
I think that there are certain elements of the push pull legs that don't make it great. I know you mentioned some of them earlier. Combining chest and shoulders, from the sounds of it, like you don't like that.
Yeah, I too can see the value of it, but for me and my like, if someone came to me and said, I want a, s- a more feminine aesthetic. I want to be fit and I want to put on muscle, but I want a more feminine aesthetic. I would not push them into a push pull legs. I would, unless they really wanted to. Because for me, where it is an important muscle group, it's not one that really builds to being very feminine and aesthetic. Is like the traps. We want to build our shoulders. We want to have that nice cap. We want to have those defined arms, but we don't want, big, huge up to your ears traps. We don't want a large chest. We don't want big obliques. There are few things where I would rather not be getting that 70-30, just to not trigger so much growth in certain muscle groups, if that makes sense.
Like if you're trying to target very specific muscle groups, obviously, I think that you have more control on a different workout. Push pull legs feels to me like it's up there in terms of balance with, I feel like, full body. Like it's real easy to like balance everything. But you're right. Like if you're a woman and you want large legs but a small chest, and cap delts but not massive traps, doing a full push workout that's trying to target all of those muscle groups, it may not be optimal for you.
That,
It,
and it's also exhausting.
yeah.
Right along with that full body, a push pull leg workout is just physically exhausting.
Mhm.
So for me, if I'm in any way in a depletion, if I am any way cutting calories, those are the workouts that are hardest for me to push through all the way to the end with any feeling of success, because I end up getting so exhausted by basically that third workout, by that third round. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
So if you are eating and if you're eating in not a deficit, and you are wanting to put on muscle and you are wanting to build a whole physique, um, all over, you want to put on muscle, that push pull legs is probably definitely the bucket you want to be in.
It's funny, a lot of the push pull leg, the pros can also be perceived as a con, right?
That's true.
Like the pros of having chest and shoulders together can also be a con, in some ways. And very much the higher volume and higher frequency that it allows can also be a con if, maybe you're working a lot and your recovery is not entirely on point, or, maybe you're a little bit older and you don't have the same energy that you did in your 20s. Doing PPL, it may not be in the question. You may not just straight up not have the full ability to go that frequently and do that much volume, which I think is kind of what you're hinting at. Like for some people, like if you're a lower energy individual or you're somebody who recovers slower, it may not be feasible to do 6 day a week routine that is also high volume.
Yeah,
Right?
this dense of a workout.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And the same things that make it great for somebody else who maybe doesn't have the same recovery capacity or means of resting and eating a lot, like you were saying, like if you either don't have an appetite or don't want to gain weight, the higher volume and more frequency, it's going to make recovery much more difficult, in which case it may not be a pleasant experience across the board. But that's not to deny its value, right? That combination of high frequency and being able to hit high volume, it can be, if you can recover properly, it can explode your growth because you're hitting all of the things, right? You're getting high volume, you're getting, the double a week routine, and it honestly there's not a huge amount of ways to beat it in terms of like pure gains, because if you program it right, it has all of the pros that other workouts, they might have the pro, but then they sacrifice it somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
But there are the certain elements like you touched on where the workouts can be difficult, they can be long. Like a push feels very much like doing an upper. Whereas if you watch our upper lower episode of this, we talk about how upper feels like a long workout because you're trying to hit so many muscle groups in one. And push is very much similar to that. Like if you don't keep a close eye on how many sets you're doing in a push, then you can easily push in an hour and a half, 2 hour mark.
Oh, yeah, way easier than you would think.
Right. And it sneaks up on you. But I think this is a perfect segue for us to talk about like what the structure of a push-pull legs would look like. We'll talk about the 3 day, and then we'll go on and we'll do an abridged version of the 6 day so that we can kind of, show you the difference. But for the most part, and for me, if you've watched the other episodes of this Build Your First Workout, I'm a believer in just doing the same thing twice, right? Or, you have the same structure on both push-pull legs, and you just change the exercises for freshness and for having a dynamic aspect to your routine. But again, I think that usually I recommend between 12 and 15 sets for any routine for beginners. This is for beginners. Most certainly everyone will be doing more sets as they grow, but we cater this information for beginners. So between 12 and 15 sets on most everything except for push-pull legs. I recommend 15. And the reason for this is because of push itself. And so with 15 sets, it allows your push, pull, and legs workouts to all have enough sets to hit every muscle group in the right amount, right?
Yeah.
And so to break down those 15 sets into push, pull, and legs, for push, we would do 2 exercises, 3 sets of chest, 2 exercises, 3 sets of shoulders, and then 3 exercises of triceps. However you want to split that up. If you want to do 3 different tricep exercises, you can do 1 set of each. If you want to do 2, you can do 2 and 1. If you want to do just 1, you can do. In general, like with triceps, I try to hit all of the different angles that you can. So maybe 3 exercises in 1 set, but honestly, it's kind of pulling hairs. And then for pull, we have our back and biceps, as we explained earlier. And so with the 15, it gives us a little bit more sets to put into our back. And so I recommend for the similar, 3, you could go up to 5 because a lot of people like biceps, but stick to the 3 sets of biceps. Again, you can do any number of exercises in that. And then 12 sets of the back. And with that, you can do 4 sets of 3 exercises or 3 exercises with 4 sets. I would recommend doing fewer exercises with more sets, because the thing about back is like a lot of them are big movers, and we'll talk about it in the exercise portion of this video. But if you're doing the right back exercises, you're hitting your whole back, things like bent over row and things like that. And so choose three really solid, a balanced approach to back, and then do 4 sets of that. So you don't have to move around as much, you don't have to load as much weight, things like that.
Yeah.
And then for legs, again, 15 sets. In my build, I would put 5 sets into calves, some sort of calf machine, or whatever calves, it doesn't really matter. We'll talk about the exercises in a minute. And then 10 sets into the upper leg. So usually I would do 2 exercises, both a big heavy movement like squats or deadlifts, or you can split it into, 3 exercises of, 3 sets apiece, or 3 and 4 sets apiece. So there's a lot of flexibility there, but you want to balance based on muscle group size. And we talk about this a lot, but you always want to put your largest muscle groups first. And so in the legs, you would do your upper first, get them out of the way, and spend the rest of your lowered energy on the lower legs, the calves or the shins, if you want to do like reverse calf raises, things like that. Similarly, on back and bis, the pull day, you would do your back first. So you do your 10 sets of back, or 12 sets of back, and then you do your 3 to 5 sets of biceps, depending on how you're structuring it. You would do those with the lowered energy near the tail end of your workout when your biceps are already tired. And then push is a little different because you have shoulders and chest. They're both big muscle groups. I tend to alternate them. Do the same exercises, so when you build your workout, do the same exercises, but have one day be chest first and one day be shoulder first, if you're doing it twice a week. If you're doing it every other week, same kind of thing. Like you would do your chest first and shoulders first the next week. The reason for this is because they affect one another. And so doing one first all of the time, it's always going to have the most energy. Because again, like whatever you put first has the most energy and most focus. Then it tapers off as you expend your energy. Anyone who's worked out kind of knows, like the further you go into workout, the less energy and less ability you have to push yourself.
Yeah, your nervous system starts to deplete, your mind muscle connection starts to deplete, you're running out of glucose, you're just kind of dragging along once you certainly get to a point.
Right. And then from there, if I were to take that push-pull legs that I just explained, and maybe you have to watch that section again because I don't think I phrased it the best way, but you take that same thing and you do it twice in a week, right? And so you would choose different exercises to plug it in, but you would have the same, 15 sets per day. You would do that twice a week, right? You'd functionally design another push, and you can make them complementary. You don't have to, like, these are just random exercises and these are random, but maybe on this one, your legs is glute focused, and on this one, your legs is quad focused, like I know you would probably do. It allows you that flexibility. And again, it's one of the strengths of the push pull legs is you get to do a lot more different exercises across your workout. And so I would just take what I just said and double it. And then if you look at the total volume over the week, if you double that, then looking at the legs, you're getting 30 sets of legs in a week, which would be considered pretty high volume, 30 sets of push and 30 sets of pull.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you break that down, obviously you'll have less to your shoulders and more to your legs. And because of the nature of branching legs into their own workout, they're always going to get the higher volume unless you're splitting things up more.
Yeah.
So that's how I would structure it, without choosing the exercises, which we'll touch on after you give us a rundown of how you would structure your push-pull legs.
This is what I like about push-pull legs, is in the structuring of push-pull legs, and it's funny enough because I would structure it in some ways exactly the same way and in some ways completely different, which is funny enough. I would do the same 15 sets for each of the 3 for the PPL. For me, because you are hitting such high volume, because you are getting those wonderful like 70-30 benefits, this is where, especially with things that I have difficulty with mind muscle connection, I manipulate what comes first on that push day, on that pull day, and on that leg day to force a better workout to certain areas. So for me, on a push day, it would be formulated exactly the same, but I would always do shoulders first. I would never do chest first because I have a difficult time with my mind muscle connection in my chest. So I would purposefully exhaust my shoulders first so that they're tired and they're not overcompensating for my chest movements. It would be the same for my back movements. I often find that my traps overcompensate in, especially when I'm doing like rows and things. So I would exhaust them first with those large movements where I'm doing, a full pull down or I'm doing a lower row so that when I move into the muscle that I really want to focus on, that I really want to have good connection with, it's not being compensated with. And then the same with the legs. I prefer working my glutes as much as possible, but I sometimes find my quads and my adductors compensating. So I would do something like quads first so that when I go into my glute bridge, they're exhausted and they're not trying to compensate the weight for me. I know it's going into the glute. So that's how I would be thinking about formulating it is when I have all that energy, what is the muscle that always ends up overcompensating for movements so that when I go to my second largest, that other 5 sets, that muscle is getting my full mental connection and is not trying to me overriding compensation of other movements. That's what I would do.
It feels like you have more of an advanced and niche approach to things based on the way you understand your body,
Yeah.
right? And so would you say, like, would you recommend to beginners that they try to cater things specifically for that? Or is that something that is kind of,
Well, for one, I would say that if you are pushing into the idea of doing a push-pull leg, you could still be a beginner, but I'm gonna say you're probably towards the wanting to branch into things. You have been feeling your body out to the point where you can take on that kind of mass in a workout. And so with that, you are going to have some idea, and especially if like I was coaching you or I was telling you came to me and asked me these questions, if this would be on the roster of things that I was asking you. Oh, you want to do a push pull leg. Okay, well, have you thought about like when you're working out, do you find, that you can't really have a good contraction here? Is your mind muscle connection really good in these areas? I would be thinking through, okay, when I do this workout, I'm not feeling it in the place I'm supposed to be feeling it.
Mhm.
And with that, having the ability to do the muscles that are all surrounding it together in a push pull leg, you are kind of able to exhaust some of them so that in that roundness, you're able to develop good connection with other muscles. And with that, I think that is very good for beginners. I think being conscious of being able to do a push up and focus on, am I feeling this in my shoulders? Am I feeling this in my chest? Am I feeling this in my glutes? Like being able to develop those things is where push pull legs can really shine.
Yeah, and it's a learned thing. I think it's probably something that beginners struggle with is like a lot of them are just doing the movements, and if the bar goes up, then
And I did it.
I did a rep. But I think it actually comes pretty quick that people start to understand like how their body feels, right? And I think specifically with chest, I've seen in the people that I've trained and working with you that a lot of the times the mind muscle for chest isn't really there. And it's something that you have to make a conscious effort. You have the tricks that you use, like when you press, twisting your wrist and things like that. I think it's very normal for people to have specific muscle groups, depending on your lifestyle, right? To have specific muscle groups that are harder to feel or I guess understand than others, right?
Yeah.
Because that mind muscle, it is an understanding. It's an understanding that this muscle is working the way it's supposed to be. And anyone doing a dumbbell bench press understands that they would, without their chest muscle, they wouldn't be able to do that. But I've seen it most with specifically that movement, that beginners have a hard time pushing their weights up because they're always exhausting their triceps before they actually start working their chest. And that's a very common thing with push movements. And it's something to be conscious of as you're learning, that you are learning to actually use your chest.
Mhm.
And when you finally do learn that, you'll know. And the reason you'll know is because your chest is a much bigger muscle than your triceps. And so the weights will start going up. The idea is, like, the better your mind muscle gets towards using the right muscle, the better the movements are going to go for you. The more you feel them, the better you're going to get at feeling them, and the more weight you're going to be able to move. And that's how you see these massive discrepancies between beginners lifting weights and people who have been training for a long time. It's like, it looks like these people, it's like, oh, like, I couldn't imagine lifting that much weight, but they put in the, I developed my mind muscle for those 10-pound dumbbells, and then I got stronger and I went to 20, and I had to reevaluate the way I was feeling it, because maybe once I got to 30 pounds, I started noticing it's like, oh man, it's a lot harder to make that jump because I'm using my triceps as a crutch. And you start to develop that intuitive understanding of what your body is doing. And that only comes with time. We kind of told you how we would structure the sets for our push-pull legs, but what sorts of exercises would you generally like put into this? Obviously, at Lucid Fitness, we preach, one of our core principles is to prioritize compound exercises and compound movements. I assume we're still, sticking to that philosophy when we're structuring these push-pull legs.
So when you are doing things, say for a push day, talking about a lot of push day, big compound movements like a bench press, like an Arnold press, an overhead press, those sort of things where you are moving all of those muscles on a back day when you're doing, large lat pull downs where you've got a wide grip, you're using your full back, you're using your biceps are still engaged. You're going to find it, or at least in my mind, I find it easier to think about exercises in a compound way on push-pull legs.
And I agree. I think for push, you usually want to find the big movers, right? Because if you're following the structure that I gave, then you only have really two exercises for chest and two exercises for shoulders, and then, one or two exercises for triceps. So you want to make those exercises count. And the best way to do that is complex compound movements, as we've been discussing. And so for chest, you would usually choose like a heavy pushing movement, like a bench press, either dumbbell or barbell, and then choose your angle, decline, incline, or flat. We're not going to cover those differences in this video, but the idea here is you put your big pushing movement for chest first, and then you would normally do, I recommend usually doing a fly, like something that stretches your chest out a bit more than a bench. It's exactly what we do. But you would do that big pushing movement, and then you do something to stretch it out, like dumbbell flies or cable flies, something like that. And then you go into your shoulders and you do similarly a heavy pushing overhead movement, either an overhead barbell, overhead dumbbell, or like we like to do the Arnold press.
Mhm.
And then you would do again the shoulders version of a fly, like a lateral raise or a lateral raise machine or a cable lateral raise. You would do one of those to hit the full spectrum of your delts. And then finally you would be doing your triceps. And I always recommend a combination of a push down type movement, like with cable, a overhead like stretching movement, like a dumbbell overhead tricep extension, and then usually something like a skull crusher where you're lowering something down, you're laying down and then lowering it to your head. If you're doing any one of those, you would be in a pretty good spot. And try to balance it. Like if one workout you do push downs, maybe the next workout you do an overhead one. That way you're hitting all of the tricep heads for the most part. But you don't have to worry about those sorts of optimizations, like hitting each tricep head the exact amount of time because if you're doing a heavy bench press and a heavy overhead and, the lateral raises and the flies, your triceps, by the time you get to triceps, are going to be thoroughly hit, right?
Yeah,
Enough
you're
so,
hitting all of those lateral heads in those movements too.
yeah. And so a lot of those things are covered by just the nature of doing the compound exercises first, enough so that there's beginner routines that completely ignore arms, right? I think we even made acknowledgement of that in our full body is like arms don't always need to be hit if you're hitting like the right compounds. For general aesthetics, I usually recommend it. I do arms because I think that bigger arms look better. Like there's nothing more to it. But moving on, so that's your push. For your pull exercises, same kind of thing. You have a lot more flexibility with back, but I generally recommend a heavy row first, either bent over or cable or dumbbell or barbell bent over. And then usually I'll do a lat pull down of some sort, either close grip or wide grip or behind the back lat, cable lat pull down, or, cable prayer or pull over. I don't know what they're called, but you can do one of those. And then usually on back, I recommend you hit rear delts. It's part of the shoulders, but I think it's a really good thing to squeeze into a back day because back has the privilege of having more time for it.
Yeah.
And so usually use one of your movements and do like some sort of face pull or something like that. And then if you still have some sets left, you can do either try to do like a light stiff leg for your lower back or go do like a hanging lower back movement. Make sure you kind of like finish and do your full back. So you want to hit your lats on, the big rows and lat pull down, rear delts on the big rows, on the rear delt flies or face pulls. You hit your middle back on pretty much all of the movements, and then your lower back, try to get it either with a bent over row or some sort of machine
Yeah.
movement, or the little hanging ones and where you raise your back. Again, same kind of thing with the push. If you're doing those heavy movements first, you don't have to worry about the specific muscles as much, because if you do heavy barbell rows, bent over rows, you're going to be hitting the vast majority of your back.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Your low back is working, your middle back is
Mhm.
working, your upper back is working.
Yeah.
Everything is working together to get that to work.
Right. And something I didn't mention is the traps, right? Traps can generally be on either shoulders or back day. Sometimes I do it on both. A lot of times I do it on both. I usually try to get it in on back day. I actually do my traps first a lot of the times. I don't recommend everyone does it, but I saw this thing on the internet like 20 years ago. It's like, if you want big traps, you got to prioritize. And then there's just some dude who like only did trap exercises. And since then, I've always had this mentality. It's like, man, I want big traps. I got to do them first. But I think that they go good in the middle or maybe first of the back exercise. I think traps are really good for like a strong superset if you want to dabble with the superset, which would be have one exercise like the barbell row. You would stand up and finish it and immediately do like a shrug movement after that and then rest. And so it kind of like gives you this extra like volume boost because the barbell row itself is going to hit your traps. And then when you go and you finish off the movement with just your traps, you're getting this extra benefit. And so it's cool because traps are a strong, big muscle.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of abuse them in a lot of ways. If you do want big traps, make your fourth exercise, a trap exercise, like a shrug or something like that. But I'm kind of getting all over the place. So after the back, you want to do your biceps. If you're doing heavy rows, heavy lat pull downs, and some sort of face pull and some shrugs, your biceps are going to be feeling it by then. And so usually I recommend some sort of hammer, a few sets of hammer curl with dumbbells, and then some sort of conventional curl, like a barbell curl or a cable curl. The more free weights, the better in my mind, but a lot of people by then, it's like even a cable curl, it's kind of exhausting to do.
Yeah.
So moving on to legs, I would usually choose pretty conventional leg exercises, a heavy squat or deadlift, and then something that kind of targets more of like, if I'm working out with you, I may choose like a hip thrust to hit the glutes more. But if I was just going by myself, wanting to choose, I'd do like a squat and then a leg press, or a belt squat machine and then, single leg press. Some, complex movement that can be loaded heavy, and then using my final time or my final sets on some sort of calf, doesn't matter what, seated, throw seated calf machine in there, standing calf machine, standing on something with, just holding a dumbbell and raising your calves. All of these hit calves. Um, and as I've said in all of these episodes, I do think that the reason we take such a loose approach on recommendations for exercise is because we think this is the best way for the beginner to have skin in the game. And what I mean by that is the beginner, it is, in my eyes, it's recommended that you go and you learn exercises, right? You go on Google and say, what's a good back exercise for, my 15 sets, or what's a good overhead press movement, that for people with bad shoulders like me, things like that. It's it's an important way of getting you to both learn without being overwhelmed, because yeah, there's a lot of exercises, but this gives you an opportunity to learn all of the different ones and what it means. Like if you want to target, let's say you want your upper chest to develop more, you can go and you can Google what is a good upper chest, and it will say something about incline, something or another. But for us to just give you our optimal, like as we saw with how you explained your optimal, like
Yeah.
if you were trying to give your workout to a dude, he'd be like, "Where's the chest?"
Right,
Right? Where's the
exactly.
chest? Where's the calves? And so those sorts of things, and that's why this is an appropriate way to get skin in the game. Is it doesn't take much time. You just like I said this in another episode. It's like if you Google back exercises, you don't even have to go to a website anymore. It's like the top of Google is just like all the back exercises. You can click on them, it'll probably go to a short or a video of some sort, and then you can watch and learn it. And so beyond the scope of this conversation in this specific podcast episode, we can't show you all of these movements. We can't tell you all of the good movements. We can tell you what we like, but by you taking the initiative and putting skin in the game, it's a way of kind of working with this idea where if you're even watching this video to begin with, you kind of want to do your own stuff. You kind of want to learn the exercises and the way to structure a routine. That's what this is about. Is like for those people, those beginners who don't necessarily want to follow or don't have any desire to even get on social media, like they can just watch this video and build a routine for themselves without committing, really anything besides their own time to build it out.
Yeah.
And as you evolve and as you grow and as you reach the more experimental phases, you'll know more of the exercise yourself and how to plug and play them. And you'll also learn as you learn your body, like, okay, well, I know my chest isn't developing as quickly as the rest of my body. I can start putting some
More chest
more
workouts.
chest sets into them. In summary, for push-pull legs, you generally would use it for 3 or 6 days a week routine. We recommend about 15 sets for each of the workouts, and then to structure it in a way where the main muscle groups, either the chest and shoulders are before triceps, and then back is before biceps, and upper leg is before lower leg. That way you're optimizing where your energy is going. So once you figure out how many sets you're doing in each of the muscle groups, you can kind of just, go to Google and search for some exercises for each, or, listen to what we said again in this episode and kind of plug in what we're saying. But really focusing on those compound movements and making sure that the vast majority of your workout are those, because that's the most efficient way to do it, to work
Yeah, to
out.
build muscle and do your workout. Yeah. I feel like that's the best way to accomplish it for sure, without you spending hours and hours in the gym.
Yeah. And if you have hours and hours, push pull legs also perfect. This is a routine where if you have unlimited time to go to the gym, maybe you're in between jobs and you just want to get your health together, or maybe you're a high school kid, or maybe you just like working out. Push pull legs is in my mind, one of the best workouts in terms of scaling it up, because honestly, you can do some crazy volume on push-pull legs. I've done it in the past when I had a lot more energy, things like the upper ends of, 40, 50 sets in a workout like that. You can do that with push-pull legs. It's very accommodating to scaling volume, and it has the added benefit of being able to have that double frequency. So you can hit muscle groups twice a week. But with that, there comes a greater recovery. There's more reliance on proper nutrition, things like that. While all of them are important, the more volume and the more frequency you have in any workout routine, not just push-pull legs, the more recovery becomes important.
Yeah.
And it's why as we get older, like it's harder and harder to do like a 6-day workout routine. We do appreciate all of you tuning in and watching this episode. It's kind of a longer one, but push-pull legs, there's a lot to talk about. So hopefully you got a little bit of extra knowledge about this, and this gives you the confidence you need to start building out your own push-pull legs routine. And if you have any further questions on this, you can always reach out to us on our Discord, or we're not the best at responding to comments on the social medias, but if you join our Discord, you can talk specifically with us 24/7 essentially. So reach out to there. If you want more information on, our core principles, maybe you haven't seen our core principle playlist, we'll plug it here at the end of this episode so you can kind of navigate to that afterwards. Thanks.